Are you ready to call every Cincinnati Bengals game for the rest of the season a must-win? That's the road we're heading down, and it starts on Sunday in Carolina.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Liscow. He's your host, James Rapien. We come to you today with a preview of a must-win game against the Bengals' former quarterback, Andy Dalton, now taking over in Carolina. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. If you're new to the show, you can hit that subscribe button to stay up to date on all things Bengals as they claw their way back into contention, hopefully starting this weekend, necessarily starting this weekend, I would say at this point. And if you're an everydayer, welcome back. Appreciate your persistent listening and your regular listening to the Locked On Bengals podcast, especially if you make us your first listen every day. And today, our episode is brought to you by FanDuel, where you can place a $5 bet and get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And James, I call it a must-win. I think you call it a must-win. Jamar Chase called it a must-win. And we're going to be saying that about a lot of games, I think, because that's what happens when you're 0-3 to start the season, even if they can get back to the 1-3 mark this weekend, which would match their poor start to 2023 as well.
Yeah, it would. And that's why they need to get themselves back into familiar territory, because 0-3 is unfamiliar territory. And it's unacceptable, right? Grand scheme of things, no one expected them to be 0-3. No one expected them to be 1-3. But that's the next step. That's the only step in the right direction. And so must win is putting it lightly. I mean, we're talking 0-4. I mean, I'm going to start thinking a little bit about the offseason, and we're a month into the season. Like, they have no business being 0-4. This is a team where I thought the minimum would be 3-1 after the month of September. So you sure as hell better be able to get a game in Carolina against Andy Dalton. And I know Andy was awesome last week, and I know the Bengals defense stunk. Flip it. It needs to flip. And that's one of the many things that we'll talk about, is obviously how this Bengals defense matches up against Andy Dalton. But yeah, they have to win this game, Jake. If there is any remote possibility of them making the playoffs, being the team that we thought they were when we were in training camp, when you were visiting here, when we were sitting where I am right now doing shows, well, they better go to Carolina and beat the crap out of Andy Dalton and the Panthers.
And there have been a number of disappointments on the way to 0-3, but showing that you can win against one of these bad teams that you started the year as a touchdown plus favorite against, and as of today, 4.5 points according to FanDuel, that line. So at least they're not touchdown favorites. They haven't been very good as touchdown favorites this year, losing both of those games straight up. But the things that have gone wrong to get to this point are many, between the offense not waking up and Joe Burrow being sped up in week 1, not making the one play in week 1 or in week 2 they needed to win those games. They were both close games, not getting a single stop on defense in week 3 on Monday Night Football against Washington. The injuries that have piled up on the defensive line, certainly a place you can point to and say, one, they've made a huge investment there. And some of those guys that are still playing at the level that they've been invested in are not producing the results that you need. And 2, they've been just hammered by injuries there, missing 5 guys, 4 guys, 5 guys at times, 4 guys now. And when your depth gets tested like that at any individual position, it's going to be rough. But you're on life support already, and I don't even think you get off life support with a win. You just don't pull the plug with a win this week. Not saying that we will pull the plug if they went to 0-4 necessarily, but at 0-3, you're already talking about how nearly insurmountable the path is to get to the playoffs. In fact, I saw somebody that points out that the Bengals don't actually even control their own destiny at this point. Even if the Bengals win out in the highly unlikely scenario that every team ahead of them also wins out, they don't get into the playoffs. Obviously, highly unlikely. If the Bengals win out, they're probably in the playoffs. But we're in week 4, and that is technically true. That at this point, technically, the Bengals don't control their own destiny, which is insane to even mention in week 4, even if it is a very outlandish scenario.
And if they win this week, they will control their own destiny. That I don't like. There's never been you know that's not, it's impossible.
Oh,
I know like the outcome could happen, but impossible. So
I know it's just like a technical thing that the fact that you can even technically say that about this team in week 4 is preposterous.
No doubt, especially because they lost to the Patriots and the Commanders and had the Chiefs on the ropes and let them off the hook. Like, yeah, you're talking about 12 points and 3 losses. And I think that's the importance here. And there is a balance of not panicking if you're the Bengals, but understanding that you got to get your tail in gear and you got to go out and start playing well in critical moments. I don't even want to say in crunch time because these games have been close, because there could be a critical play in the second quarter that completely flips the game on Sunday in Carolina, and then they can coast after that. Like, I don't know. What I do know is that a win is a win is a win, and it's a hell of a lot better than what we've seen the past 3 weeks. And so they need to find a way to get it, whatever the path is, because you're right. You described it, life support, whatever analogy you want to make. 0-4, good luck. With Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and those guys firing on all cylinders, it's hard. It's hard to win in this league. It's one of those things that you can't dig yourself too big of a hole, because no matter how well you play, no matter what you do, something's not going to bounce your way. And when that happens, you need to have at least a little bit of wiggle room. And right now they have none. Their back is completely against the wall, and they have a chance to inch forward with a win on Sunday. That's all it is inching slightly forward where your back is still up against the wall, but maybe not as pressed as tightly. You're not getting squished like they are right now. And that's the only thing they can do. And I do think that that's the vibe in the locker room right now. Of course, they're frustrated. They're mad. They're angry. But the only way to fix it is to go play better and to win. It's the only thing that fixes it. You could say whatever you want. You could point fingers if you want, and that's not going to fix it. The only way you can fix it is go out there and win. And that starts with a matchup in Carolina that everyone had pegged as a win to start the year. And why back off of that now? That's exactly what everyone should expect on Sunday.
And there are a number of paths to get to a victory in Carolina. This is another defense that is bad. This is another offense that I would say is questionable, more questionable than the Commanders offense, which last week when we talked about this, we were worried about the explosive play potential of the Washington offense. The fact that they scored on every possession against the Giants. They had red zone issues, but if they cleaned those up, they were moving the ball. We just thought the Bengals would be able to do enough on offense to put pressure on Jaden Daniels and make them have to do something, and the Bengals maybe would get a single stop throughout the game on defense. They didn't get a single stop on defense, so we're talking about a different story. The Bengals, maybe they get that red zone conversion. You talked about maybe it isn't a play in the crucial moments at the end of the game. It could be something early. If the Bengals convert their red zone opportunities early, there's more pressure on the Commanders early in that game. If they don't allow a big kick return to Austin Eckler to begin the second half, maybe the Commanders don't just go right down the field and do their thing and continue to rattle off touchdowns and scoring drives in that game. So it's not necessarily, like you said, the end of the game could be going out and scoring 40 this week. They convert all their red zone opportunities. It could be that somebody steps up on the defensive side of the ball. It could be that Lou Anarumo has a better plan for Andy Dalton the fourth time he's seen Andy Dalton than the first time he saw Jaden Daniels, which isn't an excuse, by the way. They need to have better performances against rookie quarterbacks. A record against rookie quarterbacks, as many have pointed out, is pretty dreadful. But hopefully familiarity with Andy Dalton leads to a better game plan on the defensive side of the ball, and somebody just needs to play better. Trey Hendrickson hasn't practiced 2 days this week with an illness. Hopefully he's okay. But hopefully Chris Jenkins can play more. Hopefully Lawrence Guy can play more. Hopefully Sam Hubbard can play better. Hopefully Joseph Ossai can play better. None of these are a plan, but these are all things that could happen that could help the Bengals to win their first game of the season, because it's not like they've been huge margins, but you can't unlose games because you've lost by close margins. That's not how it works. You maybe have outplayed your record, but you don't unlose games by saying, look, we are better than our record. If you take a look at all of our results, that's just not how the NFL works. You are what your record is.
That's not how sports work. The Reds have been saying it with their run differential for all season. They're still in the positive last I checked. And Well, they're sitting at home.
At some point, the
postseason.
aphorism, bad teams find ways to lose games, good teams find ways to win games, is a true thing that you need to do if you're going to be a good team. Coming up next, let's talk about some of the ways the Bengals can win this game in a little bit more depth, identify some of the matchups that the Bengals should be able to take advantage of on their way to hopefully a victory on Sunday. We'll break it down next. With Robinhood Gold, you won't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial flavors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn a very liberal rate of 4.5% APY on uninvested cash, receive unlimited 1% deposit bonuses, and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth individual for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. You can sign up today at robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC.
Today's show is also brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million with an M active members. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. All you do is put more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. So you think that Joe Burrow is going to throw for more than the number of yards that he's projected to throw for, or Andy Dalton's going to throw for less than the red rifle comes up short in the PrizePicks projections. Boom, you could just combine those two and watch the winnings roll in. That's the beauty of PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy the way it should be. And it's the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy. So your lineups stay even if one of your players gets injured. Take advantage of the fun. Get in on the action today with PrizePicks by downloading the PrizePicks app and using code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNFL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to receive the $50 bonus, or you don't even need a win to receive the $50 bonus. It is guaranteed. All you have to do is make that $5 deposit and use code LOCKEDONNFL. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, Jake, let's dive into some things the Bengals need to do to get their first win. God, we were saying this 20 days ago. What the heck are we doing saying it now? I don't know what we're doing saying it now, but we're saying it now. So let's dive into some things they need to do. First things first, and I can't believe I'm starting with defense because quarterbacks and wide receivers are the only things that matter in the NFL, in my world. The everydayers get it. But that being said, finding a way to pressure Andy Dalton has got to be one for me. It really does. Like, Jaden Daniels is still, I'm at Paycor Stadium right now for those not watching on YouTube. I still think he's standing on the 50 untouched. I know that the rest of the Commanders went to Arizona State to practice this week ahead of the Cardinals matchup. He's literally on Paycor Stadium's turf right now, just standing there scanning the field, throw it wherever he wants. And Andy Dalton can't have that luxury on Sunday. So however they need to generate pressure, whatever they need to do to generate pressure, maybe Trey Hendrickson, the lack of pressure made him sick because he's missed practice on Thursday due to an illness. I'm not sure, but you have to find a way to get consistent pressure on Andy Dalton, especially early. You don't want him to get into this rhythm like Jaden Daniels did, where it seemed like everything was going to go his way. You got to get him out of rhythm early, not let him get into a groove.
And trying to find those matchups is a little bit harder this week. We thought that Trey Hendrickson could have another day where he got a left tackle bench. The Washington Commanders were rotating left tackles in that game between Brandon Coleman and Cornelius Washington. This week it'll be Ekwonu at left tackle, former first-round pick, massive dude, has been a solid player, not necessarily quite living up to his pre-draft expectations, but then you have to find somebody else to do something, to get a win. And they're dealing with an injury at left guard where Chandler Zavala looks like he's in line for the start this week. Damian Lewis dealing with a UCL tear, and it doesn't necessarily sound like he's going to play this week. But who's going to beat the left guard for the Cincinnati Bengals? I don't know. I don't know what that answer is, but somebody needs to win besides Trey Hendrickson. Can somebody help Trey Hendrickson on this defensive line? That is a question that I'm looking for an answer for until we find an answer. And I don't know where the answer is coming from, James. There's nobody new arriving on the team this week. There's nobody coming off IR. You're just hoping that Chris Jenkins can play a little bit more and continue to be a little bit more effective than what they've gotten from some of the other guys on the roster. There's nobody coming from the practice squad. There's nobody waiting in the wings. So while we're talking about, you need to find a way to disrupt Andy Dalton, and Lou Anarumo needs to have a better game plan. He needs to confuse Andy Dalton, because we've seen what happens when Andy Dalton isn't sure what he's seeing. And he's a veteran. He's seen a lot at this point. Not necessarily the easiest thing to do in the world to confuse Andy Dalton, but you need to find a way to do it. And the tricky thing is going to be balancing the right time to find the right blitzes if the front four, as I expect, will continue to struggle and not generate much pressure. Unless Trey Hendrickson is back to almost single-handedly winning the game by himself, they're going to have to find the right time to blitz and try to catch this Panthers offense off guard. And that in and of itself is a challenge, especially with a veteran quarterback that seems to be seeing the field very well at this point. At least he did in week 3.
Yeah, he saw it great. And that's why they to me, you don't want him to pick up where he left off. And if he just marches downfield that first drive, even if they settle for a field goal, but he's moving the ball, we've seen that. He gets off to these early starts, and it really helps him. He's not – I've seen Joe Burrow rebound regularly after a slow start to seasons and games. Andy's kind of the opposite, where you kind of know what you're getting when you're getting it in a lot of ways. And not that he hasn't rebounded. People are going to find games where he played better in the second half of the first half. I'm not saying that. But usually you can kind of set the tone.
Well, yeah, we called him good Andy or bad Andy routinely for a reason, and you could usually tell pretty quick.
Yeah, and so that's what you need to channel. Make him bad Andy, take the crowd out of it very quickly, force some turnovers, and that's where the pressure comes from. Is like, I don't think you need to sack Andy 5 times on Sunday, but make him uncomfortable and make him give you a couple of them. And so maybe he finishes with 210 yards, not 300 plus, and a touchdown, not 3 like he did last week, and then you have a couple turnovers. I think that's where the pressure element comes from. It's not necessarily sacks. It's making him uncomfortable so he makes bad decisions.
You have to prevent the opposing quarterbacks that you play if you're the Cincinnati Bengals from playing 7-on-7 every week. Because I don't care who you are. If you're Jayden Daniels, if you're Andy Dalton, you're going to look that good as you're going to look like
he isn't that good. He isn't that good.
Obviously.
He's not.
But when you get to play 7-on-7 on Sunday or Monday night, as it was last week, you're going to look that good because that's what 7-on-7 is for these guys. So they need to find a way to make, and as we're talking about this, I'm sitting here listening, like thinking about the words that I'm saying, thinking about what you're saying. And it's just like, are we really having this conversation about being worried about Andy Dalton and the Carolina Panthers offense against this defense? Like, that's really where we're at right now. And it is, because this defense, despite having answers against Patrick Mahomes, and Patrick Mahomes looking pedestrian at best against the Bengals in week 2, and the Chiefs have had their struggles this year as they've struggled their way to 3-0. I would take those struggles over the Bengals struggles at 0-3. Don't get me wrong. But we're talking about this after a disaster week now, because this defense looked toothless against the Commanders. And now you've got this suddenly alive Carolina Panthers team that we're suddenly worried about because the Bengals are 0-3 because of the way things have started. And it's just crazy that we've gotten to this point. And just listening to our conversation is making me really consider that and puts it into perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally, I get it. I think it's, how do we get here? That's a good question. We'll try to answer that and talk about the offense, because the offense matters too. The offense can impact the defense in a big, big way, Jake. And we will discuss that among other things. Maybe I'll even give a prediction this week. Am I really going to pick Andy Dalton over the guy who got Andy Dalton fired in Cincinnati? We'll answer that question, much, much more coming up next.
This episode of Locked On Bengals is sponsored by FanDuel. FanDuel is making it easy to make it a big start to the NFL season. Now that we're into week 4, they've got an awesome offer for you at America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check the stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more at the same place you place your bets. And if you're making a mid-game bet, or if you're just getting started on FanDuel, well, when you place your first $5 bet, FanDuel will give you $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. This week, the Bengals are 4.5-point favorites on the road in Carolina, which is, if you consider the home road advantage, they're roughly seen as a touchdown better team at home than the Carolina Panthers, which hasn't gone so well for them the last couple times out, but they're still minus 210 to win. And if you're interested in that bet, well, you can get $200 in bonus bets if it's your first bet at FanDuel. You can check it out at FanDuel.com to get started. Again, that's FanDuel.com just to get started.
All right, Jake, let's get to Andy, Dalton, Joe Burrow. I can't believe we're having this conversation, but the other way, the offense can help the defense a ton. And they tried to. By the way, they did exactly what we hoped they would do against the Commanders. You go down, you don't settle for 3, you score a touchdown, you have the explosive play. I mean, they checked every box to start that game. Check that box again. Get a lead early again. And hopefully this defense takes advantage of that. I think that's where this offense should be. You put on our background for those that aren't watching on YouTube, just score 40.
Yeah.
Which is that's a very James-like comment, I feel like. I've been just score 30, and that didn't work on Monday. I've been like that for years. But I'll say it again. You go hang 30 in Carolina, I'm going to feel pretty darn good about your chances.
Well, and the second drive matters too, is what we learned this week, because on the second drive, the Bengals took 11 plays to go 47 yards, and then they missed a field goal. And a big part of that is that they rushed at the end of the first quarter to get another playoff. And well, they set a couple plays on fire there because they were worried that T. Higgins may have fumbled the ball. I went back and looked. Don't think he did. Third drive, that matters too. Bengals settling for a field goal in the red zone. Fourth drive also matters, settling for a field goal in the red zone. If those drives go a little bit differently in the first half, and this is why the second half isn't the only thing that matters. When the Bengals are doing cool stuff on offense, the motion rate is up. They're doing a more diverse personnel groupings. They're using Chase Brown in the running game to great effect. And the running game was awesome against the Commanders. And it should be again this week against the Panthers that are similarly bad on the defensive side of the ball. They should be able to run the ball again. They should be able to get pretty much anything they want on offense. But in those clutch moments, they need to convert when they get behind the chains. They need to convert when they get into the red zone. And that's when I say just score 40. Well, this is what we're talking about. You don't score 40 by settling for field goals and for coming up short in clutch situations early in the game, thinking that, oh, our defense is going to get a stop. If you're the offense right now, you need to play with your hair on fire, like every drive needs 7. And that's not really fair to the offense. It shouldn't be their job to score 40 points every game. But that's where the confidence level is in this defense right now until we see otherwise.
Yeah, I think there's there's danger in that though too. Because if you go into it feeling that way, you're going to press. It's like I'll use a baseball reference. You can use any sport, but like if you think you got to get a hit at every at bat and otherwise nothing's going to happen, you're going to press and you're going to swing at bad pitches, and then it's just not going to go as well as it could if you're relaxed and playing your game. And so I do think that there's a balance there. But to your point, the other night they had to play perfect on offense to get a win. Like that's what they would have had to have done. And they didn't. They were really darn good, not perfect. And so to me, it's both. Like the defense can't be, you just can't do that in the NFL and expect to win games, because the odds of the Bengals being perfect, there's going to be a drop, or there's going to be a fumble, or there's going to be a play that doesn't work. Like that's just what happens when you give up any kind of resistance and put up any kind of resistance. And I expect the Panthers defense to be a little resistant, unlike the Bengals defense on Monday night. And so it goes hand in hand. But to your point, yeah, I mean, this offense, it's got to lead the show. It's got to carry this team. That's something that we kind of thought would be the case in the scenario coming into the year. And that was before the injuries to BJ Hill and Sheldon Rankins, both not practicing again on Thursday. I would be shocked if either one played. I think Hill probably has a shot against Baltimore next week. But yeah, I think 30 is a realistic number. And by the way, defense, go prove everyone wrong. You've heard it's going to be 6 days how bad you sucked. So don't go out there and suck in Carolina. Be better than that. Force a couple of turnovers. I think that's part of it. But yeah, the pressure is on the offense. And I think Joe knows that. I think Jamar knows that. And I said it last year going into Arizona when they were 1-3. I'll say it now going into a game where they need to be 1-3. Doubt Joe, doubt Jamar at your own risk. But obviously they're going to have to shoulder the burden on Sunday.
The thing is, they should be able to get whatever they want. I know you're talking about pressing and this idea of playing under an increased stress and all these things, feeling like you have to carry the entire team. You don't want to feel like that, and I agree with you. But this Carolina secondary shouldn't be able to handle the Bengals receivers. This Carolina front isn't very scary. They're one of the worst pass rushing units in the NFL. Nick Scott is currently in line to start at safety for the Panthers, old friend looking for a revenge game. You should be able to take advantage of that. Are you a little bit worried perhaps about Amarius Mims making his rookie debut against Jadeveon Clowney? You shouldn't be, but Clowney is a vet. He might get a win or two. So, maybe there's some disruption there. But looking at the individual players that make up this Carolina defense, I mean, they would have to really exceed my perception of their ability to make much more of a dent in slowing down the Cincinnati Bengals offense than the Commanders did.
I mean, they slowed down Devontae,
Gardner Minshew still playing quarterback for.
Sure. But I'm just saying it happened. And they were far better than the Bengals defense was on Monday, right? Like that's all. So it is a balance. To your point though. Yeah, of course. The Bengals offense is better than the Raiders offense. We know that.
Should be one of the best offenses in the NFL. And they've found new answers. The 12 personnel package continues to be prominently featured. Like I said, the run game concepts they're using are more diverse and more effective than they've been. Chase Brown was awesome. Let's get him the ball on a consistent basis going forward. And Zach Moss was still effective and efficient when he's running the ball. This is one of the most efficient running games in the NFL, actually, and they just aren't running the ball very much because of the way their games are going. And so if you can use that to help set some stuff up, awesome. When they went into crunch time in that game against the Commanders, they went back and were essentially the 2021-2022 Bengals, where they're shotgun, no motion, static offense the entire time, let Joe Burrow read the field, get the ball out. And that also worked. They went, I think, 13 plays to go 140 yards on 2 drives for 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter of that game when they went back to their tried and true shotgun, no motion. We're getting guys out into the pattern kind of offense. 11 personnel heavy at that point. But they've also shown us this year that they can do other things with these new with the depth they have at tight end and the addition of Eric Hall, Mike Gesicki making plays in the middle of the field. And Burrow showed that he is still able to deliver the ball in tight windows like that out to Andre Yosevich in the fourth quarter, or 2 really good throws on verticals to Jamar Chase in that game. He wasn't perfect. And we've talked about this a lot. We've picked it apart, but he's playing well. The receivers are playing well for the most part. You can't have drops this week. That is one thing that has been consistent in 3 games and needs to be cleaned up. The offensive line is playing well enough. Your run game is better than it's been in years. So why couldn't you get what you want against a Carolina defense that, sure, they had a better week against the Raiders' bad offense last week, but this ain't the Raiders' offense. You should get what you want this week.
No doubt. And that's why I have the Bengals winning this game. They should win the game. And I think they're going to win the game. And I get it. People are nervous. Andy played well last week. The Bengals defense didn't. They're going to hold them to under 20 points on their home stadium. 27-17. The Bengals get it done. Double-digit win. And it's still going to feel back against the wall. Like I said, you're just going to take maybe a step out, but you're still going to feel backed up, Bengals. But I do think that they respond the right way. I think they play pretty darn well. Maybe not score as much as Jake Liscow is hoping for, but they score enough to get it done and improve to 1-3 on the season. I can't believe we're talking about 1-3. Like the only time they should be 1-3 is if we included the preseason and 0-3, and then they beat the Patriots 1-3. That's the only way this team should have been 1-3, and instead they're trying to get their way there on Sunday.
It's truly dreadful stuff. They need this win badly. And then they've got Baltimore for their first AFC North contest.
Yep.
I mean, they need to stack wins. It needs to start this week. It needs to continue for quite a while. If they can get to a winning record before their bye, then we can start talking about the playoffs again.
You're way ahead of me. Just get a win Sunday.
And that's where it starts. That's what I'm saying. Like it needs to start now.
Yeah.
I'm not ready to talk about the offseason yet, James.
I'm not ready to talk about Baltimore yet. Let's
avoid both of those things by concluding the show.
That's right. Let's do it.
We'll be back with you after the Bengals play against the Carolina Panthers on Sunday. Sunday, 1:00 start in Charlotte. One of the, there's a lot of Queen cities. Anyway, we're not going to go down that rabbit hole. The other Queen city of the NFL, so they claim. The Bengals will be in Carolina on Sunday. We'll have your recap afterward. And until then, thanks for listening to this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Hoo day, and have a good one.